Hey there, folks. This morning we are doing something a little bit different. I got a doozy of a math question from a family who wanted a bit of guidance, so I thought this is something that all of us can learn from. Now, the question was, with these three numbers, how can we write them in a math equation like this in order to give us first the highest quotient and secondly to give the lowest quotient. So this is asking us to use these three numbers to create an equation where we are dividing a whole number by a fraction to give us an answer here. So one thing that we need to know first of all is the terminology. So a quotient means the answer from a division problem. And we also need to know a little bit about fractions. So we need to think about what is our smallest fraction going to be, what is our largest fraction going to be if we're using these three numbers. So first of all, if we think about these first two numbers, if I write this fraction, 3/4, or some people might call that 3/4, this number is going to be less than 1. Now, if we want to write that with mathematical terms, we can write it like this. 3/4 less than 1. Okay? That means that 1 is bigger than this number right here. Now, the other thing that we can think about is, what if we use the numbers in a different order? What if we say this? What if we say 4/3? Now, anytime when you have this top number, that's the numerator. If the numerator is bigger than this bottom number, the denominator, that means that this fraction is actually going to be greater than 1. Oh, and Charlie's walking across my table here. Okay, so 4/3, we can also write this as something that is called a mixed fraction. So 4/3 also can be written like this: 1 and 1/3. So that means that we have 3/3 equaling our 1, and then that 4th third becomes 1/3 there. Okay, so that's one thing for us to think about. So a good starting point in my mind to think about how we are going to make a bigger or smaller quotient here is, what fraction is going to be our largest fraction? Which fraction is going to be our smallest fraction? So what's the smallest fraction that you can make using those three numbers? We know that 4/3 is going to be larger than 1. What about if we did 12/3? That's also going to be larger than 1 because, again, our top number is bigger than our bottom number. So the way that I'm going to think about this is that I know that, maybe I'll write it over here. I'll write it down here. I know that 3 times 4 equals 12. So that's an important little thing for me to know here, because that means that I have, if I'm thinking about thirds, that means that I've got 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. All of those are inside that number 12. So 12/3 is actually going to be equal to 4. Okay. Now, this, I think, is going to be the biggest number that I can make. Let's think about, what if I say 12 fourths? How much is that going to be? 12 fourths. So I'm going to use this same idea here. I know that 3 times 4 is 12. So if I'm going to expand this, what that means is it's 4 plus 4 plus 4. So 12 fourths is actually equal to 3. So of both of these fractions, 12 thirds is our larger number. Okay, now let's think the opposite way. You know what? I'm going to just write here, this is our biggest fraction. Okay. Now, what about if I'm thinking of our smallest possible fraction? If I think about these 3 numbers that we've got, where's that going to take us? Now, thirds are going to be our largest fraction because we can think about it like this. We've got 1, 2, 3 pieces, and those are pretty big. If I think about fourths, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are supposed to look equal for us. But we can see that these fourths are actually smaller than those thirds. And then if I'm going to think about twelfths, how will I divide that up? Let me see if this will work. 4. That'll be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, okay, this will work. Sometimes I just need to stop and think. Okay, does that do it for us? So we've got, I'm going to start counting here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, darn it. How else can I divide that? 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so we can see, I haven't made this exactly equal here, but what the important thing is that we can see that twelfths are going to be the smallest piece. When we're thinking about it as fractions or pieces of one whole, twelfths no doubt are the smallest that we can use. So that probably means that if we write something like this, 3/12, that's going to be a very small piece. And now this is when we think about how many do we have. The denominator is going to be the same if we think about 3/12 or 4/12. So we're talking about the same size of pieces here, but here we only have 3 of those pieces. Here we have 4 of those pieces. So that means 3/12 is going to be our smallest fraction. Now again, this is just the way that my brain thinks of things. I don't consider myself to be a really strong math person, but this is how I think about it, and if it works out in the end, that's fantastic. If we try it this way and it doesn't work out in the end, then we'll have to think of doing it a different way. And of course, your mind might think differently than mine. That's no problem. There are many different ways to do math. Okay, so now we know what our biggest fraction is using these numbers. We know what our smallest fraction is using these numbers. So now how can we use that to get in here? If I have a larger number or a smaller number, I want to think about, I'm going to think about this by pausing the camera and think about it off camera for a minute. Okay, after thinking for a minute, here's how I'm going to try to explain it. Let's imagine that we have a pizza that has 10 slices, okay? And if we have a pizza with 10 slices and we're going to divide it between 2 people, if we're going to share it between 2 people, then that means that each person is going to get 5 slices. If we've got that same pizza and we're going to share it between, let's say, 5 people, then each person's only going to get 2 slices. So what we see here, we're using the same number here, if this number is smaller, then we get a bigger answer. So I'm going to write that here. This smaller number, we get a bigger answer. Okay, now here we're using the same number, 10. And if we have a bigger number of people in this case that we're dividing it by, then we get a smaller answer. So that relationship is really important, right? Now we're going to use that to apply to this area, because what that means is that if we have a smaller number here, that's going to give us a bigger answer. If we have a bigger number here, then we are going to get a smaller answer there. So that's why I'm thinking about our biggest fraction or our smallest fraction. And the other thing that I want to show you is also that if we divide a number by a number that's less than 1, what's going to happen to it? And, I'm going to use my calculator for this. So let's say we divide 10 by 1. We know that's going to be 10. If we do 10 divided by 2, then we've already seen that here. We know that's going to be 5. Now, what if we change this? What if we do 10 divided by 0.5? That's actually a number that is smaller than 0. So before we do this on our calculator, think about what we learned here. If the number we're dividing by is smaller, we get a bigger answer. So here we did 10 divided by 2 is 5. 10 divided by 5 is 2. Now, we know that 0.5 or half is actually smaller than 2. It's smaller than 1. So we're dividing 10 by a smaller number. Do we think that's going to give us a bigger or smaller answer? Just take a minute, think about that. Let's check out on our calculator what actually happens here. 10 divided by 0.5 equals 20. Wow. So when we're dividing by a number that's smaller than 0, we're actually getting an answer that's bigger than the number we're dividing by. Okay, let's try this again. What if we do 10 divided by 0.25? Now, 0.25 is even smaller than 0.5. So what's going to happen with our answer, with our quotient? Let's see. $40. Wow, okay, gets even bigger. So I'm going to leave it there. I still want our students to have a little bit of discovery to see if they can solve this problem on their own. But the important things that you need to think about are that if the top number here, the numerator is bigger than the denominator, then that's going to be a number that's bigger than 1. If your number on the top, your numerator is smaller than your denominator, your answer, or pardon me, not your answer, but this number, this fraction is less than 1. And with our numbers that we've got here, 3, 4, 12, this is the biggest fraction that you can make. This is the smallest fraction that you can make. I think, at least. So you might find something different. So with that information, I hope that you can think about how can you use these 3 numbers to fill in these 3 boxes to make the biggest quotient and the smallest quotient. So you're going to have different numbers in here each time to make the biggest answer and the smallest answer here. I hope that helps. Let me know what you find out with this problem solving.